And hello, friends. We welcome you to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. And I'm Elliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. We are pleased to be joined by Bookstore owner and author Dr. Wendy Welch, who's joining us here on the program today to talk to us about her career as a bookstore owner, her career as a writer, and what she's been up to both professionally and personally as both a writer and a clinical professional. Dr. Wendy Welch lives in Big Stone Gap, Virginia. She is the author of The Little Bookstore of Big Stone Gap, which is a memoir published in 2012 by St. Martin's Press. She has a forthcoming book about foster care and adoption in the coalfields of Appalachia titled Fall or Fly. She has also published a book of academic essays on the subject of public health in Appalachia. Dr. Welch is employed as the Executive Director of the Graduate Medical Education Consortium of Southwest Virginia, and she was recently chosen as the 2018 New River Gorge Writer-in-Residence in Fayetteville, West Virginia. And we're delighted to have Wendy Welch with us here today to talk to us about her career and what she's been up to as a writer. So, Wendy, welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So tell me a little bit, first of all, about the story of how you got into bookstore ownership. And I wanted to read an opening line from your book,
Okay.
Which really caught my attention, The Little Bookstore of Big Stone Gap. Early on in the book, you say, by the time Jack and I met, some 12 years before the bookstore in Big Stone Gap entered our lives, we had between us lived in 8 countries and visited more than 40. The first 5 years of our marriage were spent back in Jack's native Scotland as cheerful workaholics with pretensions to vagabond artistry. His salary as a college department head and mine for directing an arts nonprofit afforded us fulfilling lives of music, story, friends, and travel throughout the British Isles and the United States. So tell us a little bit about that experience and how did that lead you to buying and owning this bookstore called The Little Bookstore of Big Stone Gap?
Right. Well, when Jack took early retirement from his academic career in Scotland, I was running a storytelling and singing nonprofit, traditional music and song. And we knew we were going to come back to the States at that point so I could launch my academic career. And when we got over to the States, we got ensnared by this big white house that wanted to be a bookstore. We had always in the back of our minds said, in the same way that people who like to eat say, someday I'll open a restaurant. We like to read. So we said, we should open a bookstore someday. And then suddenly someday was plausibly right now, because here this house sat. And it was a really terrible time to open a bookstore, both personally and socially in the larger community. E-books were just hoving into view on the horizon, and Amazon's sales were rising exponentially. And we had also just left a very a difficult job that had been, sometimes when you're in the arts, people fight very, very hard for very small circumstances. And we had just left a job where we were just tired of dealing with arts, tired of dealing with people, and we just settled ourselves down and planned to live a quiet, small life, and then the house went. And that was it. We started a bookstore. We never looked back. We're still there.
And when did you start the bookstore?
2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because, we see so many stories in the news and online that, the independent bookstores are going away and that we're all going to be an Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com society and that, where there's not going to be any more printed books. It's all going to be electronic.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is when you look at the research over the last 4 or 5 years, the trend is going up for independent bookstores and they're making a resurgence where Barnes and Noble and some of your bigger chain bookstores are closing stores. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and about why you think the shift is going the other way where the independent bookstores are making a comeback?
Yeah. There's actually a part in Little Bookstore about this, and my husband likes to refer to himself as the prophet now because he called it. He said, e-books will be a passing fad. People will return to print books. They will use e-books for travel, and they will use print books for all the other times. Because community bookstores, like the one we're in here, Empire Books, they're watering holes. They are misfit watering holes for the intellectuals and the academics and what people sometimes call, and we don't like to use it without contextualizing it because it can sound derogatory, and it's not, trailer park intellectuals, people who are underemployed for their intelligence level, but they haven't benefited from formal education. There's a lot of people in West Virginia who are really, really smart and didn't go to college. And those people, in particular, love bookstores. And it's a place for them. It's the watering hole for people who haven't found another place to fit. We call it the third space, the third place. You have your home, you have your work, and your expectations of being in those places are set. But a bookstore is a third place, sort of like that fictional bar Cheers. You know, everybody knows your name, and you can be whoever you think you are. You don't have to be the mom or the dad. You don't have to be the employee or the boss. You just are you. And we have a lot of people who come into our bookstore looking for that as much as they are looking for books. It's like when you go into a restaurant, you're paying for ambiance as much as you're paying for food. When you come to a bookstore, you're soaking up that community atmosphere. And that's why Amazon had it backwards. They tried to pick off the big guys and left the little guys for last. If they really wanted to be the one and only, they should have tried to pick off the little guys first. Because you can kill a water buffalo, but you can't kill a million mosquitoes. And in 2012, when my book came out, my editor called me at the end of the year and she said, I want to tell you something you're going to like. And you didn't do it. It's not your responsibility. But she said, independent bookstore sales have risen 8% in 2012, and they're trending to rise up to as much as 12% in 2013. She said, that's unbelievable. When Jack and I went around, punting the book after it had come out, we went to bookstores. The usual trick was to line you up at Barnes & Nobles, to line you up at big retail places. And we went to all these little independent bookstores, and my editor basically said, that's sweet, but this is 3% of our market. And now I think people are paying a lot more attention to independent bookstores just because of the combination of statistical proof and anecdotal evidence that people like to be in them.
Absolutely. So how did you go about constructing this story? Because it is a memoir, and it kind of takes us through this whole process of wanting to do own a bookstore, and then owning the bookstore, and some of the challenges that have come from that. So how did you go about putting this story together kind of from beginning to end?
Okay. So I wrote a book about how to run a bookstore, and I sent it off to an agent in New York, and a day later, I got an email that basically said, oh, honey, darling, nobody in their right mind is going to try to open. This was in 2010. Nobody in their right mind is going to buy a bookstore or try to operate a bookstore now. They're going away. They are dead. But I like the way you write, so if you want to send me a different proposal, that'll be fine. Thank you. And I was talking to my support group of friends and saying, not quite the expectation I had in mind. I was kind of hoping, and, New York Publishing says bookstores are dead. And my friend Cammie, who is herself a published writer, she's the author of a memoir called Second Wind, she said to me, she's known me since I was 18. And she said, Wendy, you're really funny. You and Jack are even funnier than you think you are. People just think everything you do is hysterical because you're just both so silly sometimes. I'm like, gee, thanks. You're really cheering me up here, And she said, no, I think you should rewrite the book, not as a how-to manual, but here's what we did, and just let your natural funniness come out. Okay. So that's what I did. I rewrote the book. And then I gave it to a few friends to read, and my friends said, this is hysterical. You should try to publish it. And I thought, well, I did. And they told me bookstores were dead. They said, but this is not a how-to manual. This is a here's what we did funny story. So I did. Now, is this the part? Do you want advice for aspiring writers on how to get an agent?
Sure.
Okay.
I was going to ask you that later, but go ahead and address that now.
This is how you get an agent, because this is how I got my agent. You go to a bookstore or a library. You find the books that are like the book you've written. You look in the acknowledgement section in the back. You look for the agent's name. And then you find out online if that agent accepts unsolicited queries. If they don't query them. Your name will be mud in all of the New York publishing houses ever afterward. Don't do it. It's a small community. But if they do accept unsolicited queries, you put the best query letter together that you possibly can, and there's a lot of advice online. There's a book by Catherine Sands on how to do this very well. There's some other books that have just come out. There's no lack of how to put together a query letter. You put together the world's greatest query letter, and you send it to 10 of those names that you have gotten from those books. And then you wait. And that's what I did. I actually sent it to 11 because my friend Cammie said at the same time her agent wanted to see it because Cammie told her it was funny. So I sent it to 11 agents. I got get lost responses from 8 of them. I never heard from one of them. There was simply no response at all. Two of them said, I'd like to talk to you. One of them basically said, this is rough. If you write it again and get back to me, we'll talk again. We'll see about working together. And the other one said, call me. And that was actually Cammie's agent. And when I called her, I actually pulled over in a parking lot and called her. And she said, basically, your writing is lovely. Your proposal for how you're going to sell your book in the query sucks. She said, you couldn't sell your way out of a paper bag. Like, okay, is that bad? She said, yeah, that's bad, honey. But listen, here, take notes. So she spent 45 minutes with me, and I had a notebook, and I was scribbling what to do. And at the end of the 45 minutes, I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am going to rewrite my proposal. I'm going to put it out there. I am going to get myself an agent. And she said, so you don't want to work with me? And I realized, oops. You know? And I actually said to her, I thought you were being nice to me because you are my friend's agent. And she said the best line ever. She said, I am a New York literary agent with an office in Manhattan. We're not nice to people for 45 minutes. I thought, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she is a wonderful, wonderful agent. But that's what you do. You go through that library, find the names, query. That's how you get them.
And I think the key is, because we've had other authors on the program that have touched on this, even if you go through a publisher that doesn't require an agent, and there's a lot of good publishers out there that don't require agents,
and
but
some genres. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But don't get discouraged. You know, as you said, you sent 10 or 11 out. Eight people told you to go away. One person never responded at all. One person basically said, if you want to redo the whole thing, I might talk to you. So the key is not to get discouraged through the process. Is that right?
Basically, yes. And celebrate every single thing that happens to you along the way. You never know in publishing what's going to happen when. So when something nice happens to you, mark it.
Right. Absolutely. Very good. I think that's excellent advice. I just want to ask you, and then I want to talk to you about your upcoming book, Fall or Fly. But
it's actually out.
Oh, it is out.
It
Okay,
came out
good.
in January.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges, though, to writing a bookstore? Because I think as bibliophiles, you know, we love the allure of books. We love the intoxicating smell of books, old and new. That adrenaline rush you were talking about of walking into that bookstore and versus a retail chain and people knowing who you are, knowing your reading habits if you frequent a certain independent bookstore. But there has to be, and I know there are challenges. What are some of the challenges that you and Jack face sort of on a, maybe not a daily basis, but a weekly or monthly basis in running a bookstore?
In running a bookstore? At Christmas, a lady came in and said, can I use your Wi-Fi? It was right after Christmas. Can I use your Wi-Fi? Sure. She sat down, she used the Wi-Fi. She looked up some books that we had on the shelf and she ordered them online. And we were like, what? Why did you do that? She said, well, my son gave me a Kindle for Christmas and but I knew I wanted to read these books that you had. And we're like, okay. Now, actually, that lady came back a couple of months later, and she said, I don't like this Kindle. It's good for airplanes, and that's about it. And so she started buying books from us again. But we knew her. She was one of our misfits that hung in the family. And we were like, okay, if that's what you want to do, you can do it. But, boy, we feel kind of like chopped liver over here. You know?
Right.
So that was a funny part. People who don't want to pay half price. Like most of our paperbacks are half price, and most of our hardbacks are a third of the price. And they'll be like, "Well, I can get this for," and they'll name a thrift store or something like that. Thrift stores don't tend to have good books because smart people go in there and get them. So thrift stores don't have the kind of westerns that most guys are looking for. They never have Louis L'Amour's for more than 20 minutes at a time. So, but they'll come in and they'll say, I can get this at, and they'll either name Amazon or a thrift store. And there's a really good story in here of a guy who has since retired, but he had a bookstore in Rolla, Missouri, who used to talk about the Amazon effect. And he told people, yes, you could get it at Amazon, but they wouldn't hold a conversation with you. You wouldn't be able to use the toilet, and they wouldn't have given you a cup of coffee. And, people usually cheer up when you mention that. And then the fact that people are in an independent bookstore in the first place, usually they're more likely to cite the yard sale or the thrift store. At which point you have to say, yes, but we actually have up on a mission statement on our wall that we are not a thrift store, we're a bookstore. And you have to be gentle, but you have to be firm. That's probably one of the biggest ones. The other one is not drowning in paperback copies of Jaws and Chicken Soup for the Soul. Oh, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. And you don't drown in James Patterson's because they circulate. But there are some books that, if you don't see them coming and head them off at the pass, you could build yourself a whole staircase just from those books.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you mentioned Jaws. I've used Jaws a lot when I teach, to teach comparison contrast writing and to teach narrative structure or lack of a narrative structure. I've used Jaws a lot, but it is interesting, and I think any of us that have been into those thrift stores have seen that. There are 8 copies of
Twilight,
of Twilight, or an old romance, Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to sort of turn away from the little bookstore of Big Stone Gap and talk to you about your newest book, Fall or Fly, the strangely hopeful story of foster care and adoption in Appalachia. I think what we've seen a lot in the news recently, particularly in Appalachia, is the drug crisis, the opioid crisis, and so many children being taken away from parents because of drug problems, or babies being born to drug-addicted parents, which is going to create a long-term problem. But how widespread is this issue of foster care and adoption in Appalachia?
How widespread is opioids within it, or how many children are in foster care?
Maybe both. Okay. Or is there a connection between the two?
There is a big connection. 100% of the 500 children in the 3-county area where I started my study, 100% of the children had living parents who were incarcerated or incapacitated by drugs. That went down to 98% because a family, a mother literally died, and then the children really were orphans. These are not orphans anymore. These are kids who are neglected by their parents because their parents can't break out of addiction, and they literally lose their minds. One of the things that I wind up saying over and over when I'm talking about this book is that becoming addicted doesn't mean you stop loving your kids. It means you stop being able to take care of them, which kind of puts you on the 9th circle of hell, because not only are you losing your children, but you've lost your children to something that people don't understand. They don't see it as an illness. They don't see you as any form of victim. They see you as a bad parent, particularly in Appalachia, where you can say coal is king all you want, but family is queen, and the king bows to her every single day of his life, right? The worst thing you can do in Appalachia is mess up with your family. So if you are addicted and you lose your kids, you're going down 3 times for one thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very, it's very difficult in the first sense because of the parents, and then kids who are in foster care have a lot of stigma attached to them. It used to be, the social workers were quick to point this out, it used to be that teachers were the number one alerter that a child needed to go to foster care. And a social worker would receive a call from a school, they would go out to the school, and there would be no horrific removal scene from the family. The family would receive counseling, they would get help, they would find out what the bruising was about, or they would find out why the child didn't have any lunch. There was either neglect or harm, and they would correct it. If they couldn't correct it, they would take the child away. But it was not the kind of scene it is now. They would come after school and simply take the child with them, and there would be no yelling scene with the parents. Now, the kids social workers are being asked to ride along on police raids in drug operations. And they're literally scooping up the kids, putting them in the back seat, going on to the next place and getting the other kids. And social workers, are able to drive their own cars and peel off, but you literally have 2 families worth of children sometimes going down the mountain together in the back of a cruiser. And these kids are scared, they're mad, they're angry. It may be difficult, but it's the family they know. And there was no warning. There was no careful consideration to build up to a family counseling session with them. The social workers showed up with the police, and there went the kids. And the social workers hate it. But this is the new normal for social work in America, not just Appalachia.
And very sad too when you think about it on so many different levels. And I know that you interviewed more than 60 social workers, foster parents, adoptees, and others to share their experiences in this book. Did you find it difficult to get those people to open up and share their experiences, or how did you go about picking the 60 that you did?
Right. So when Little Bookstore came out, there was a pastor in town who liked it, and he thought it was great. He called me up and he asked me to do a book about foster care. And I said, if we do a book about foster care, it's going to be center stapled. We're not going to get massive distribution. It's not going to work. Let's do a blog instead. We started to do the blog. The book came along. People can read the front of the book and they'll find out why the book came about. But when it became evident that we were going to do the book, this pastor put me on to 3 other social workers, and they became the composite character social workers that all the others hang on. All 60 of the social workers are fit into basically 5 different people. But that pastor's his very high regard in the social work field, the fact that this was a guy, he was like a key that would open any door. He said, it's okay, you can talk to her. And then, God help us, the social workers would not stop talking. Nobody had ever let them talk before, and they had a lot to say, and the first 2/3 of our time together, however long we had, was negative. They just wanted to spew the things they had seen, the things they had been forced to do, the things they had been forced to let ride. They had a lot to say, and they were mad. When that came out, when they were done, when the lava was over of the volcano of them erupting, then they had things to say about suggestions to change the system for the better, things they wanted to do. They were not hard to get to talk to me because of that pastor. The foster parents, it was very, very hard to get foster parents to talk, because foster parenting is one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're either a saint or a very, very bad sinner. You can't be a normal person and raise somebody else's kids. It's particularly in the coal fields. It's just weird. So foster parents were very, very reluctant to talk to me, even when they were promised complete anonymity, even when I didn't take a tape recorder. I just sat there and I said, I have nothing except my head to listen to you with. Just tell me your stories. That was when I got the most stories from them, was when I just sat down and said, I'm not going to do anything except listen to you. And then when I got back in my car, I wrote like a mad beast for 10 minutes trying to pull down what they had said. And their stories were actually remarkably similar in terms of what they had encountered and what they had fought with and what they had decided was the best thing they could do in the situations. It was a lot harder to interview bad foster parents than it was good ones. Because, first of all, bad foster parents don't self-identify. They don't believe they are bad foster parents. We're not talking about pure evil. We're talking about people who just don't emotionally invest in the kids. People don't walk up to you and say, yeah, I've got some foster kids, but I don't really care about them. You know, they walk up to you and they tell you why they're a saint, you know. So you had to pick through what they were saying, and those were the hardest interviews I've ever done in my life. And I've been an ethnographer for 20 years, and a journalist for 10 years before that. Those were the hardest interviews I had ever done in my life, was realizing the motivations of some of the foster parents. And then the really good foster parents were very, very cautious of talking, probably because they didn't want people to be interpreting. If people can interpret, they can judge. And if people can judge, what they don't understand, they're going to condemn. And the foster parents were very, very cautious of talking to me. Not like the social workers. You couldn't, once they knew they were safe, buddy, you could not make them stop talking.
Very good. And I know that in doing a little research on Fall or Fly, that it's been described as narrative journalism. That you kind of take that approach, which
Yeah.
Is a great way to tell this kind of a story.
Yeah.
Wendy, and I want to ask you too, and I know this may be a loaded question, and you may not know, but maybe make a prediction. Based on the research that you did, the conversations that you had with the social workers, the foster parents. Do you get a sense that we're ever going to get over this issue? That we're ever going to get past the opioid problem? That we're ever going to get into a situation where I don't want to say go back to normal, because normal is different for everybody. But is what we're seeing now with all of this? Is this our new normal?
Yes, this is our new normal. This is foster care is. This is a dangerous thing to say, because people will challenge you and people get mad at you, but foster care is set up for the convenience of society at large. It is not set up to take care of the kids. If you have people who actually are invested in the kids. You have those little points of light individuals. That makes a difference to the kids who are in that family. That's where the best future of foster care lies, is in recruiting those people who will emotionally invest in the kids. And that is the best possible future. Even if right now we got all of the possible good parents we could get, first of all, we would still fall short of the homes that are needed. Secondly, you would still have a generation that got raised in group homes and got raised in inappropriate foster care and got raised in settings where they were not emotionally invested in. We already have a lost generation. Even if we stopped right now, it's still too late, because those people are entering their 30s and they don't have life skills. Some of them are better at it than others, and some of them will be able to fake it till they make it, and some of them won't. So I hate to tell you we're already screwed, but the best future we can hope for is to get a lot more people who are invested in investing in other people to become foster parents. That would keep us from spiraling.
Interesting point, and I appreciate you sharing that and being candid and honest about it.
And on that downer.
Yes. So, Wendy, as we finish up, I did want to ask you, now that you've got the little big bookstore, Big Stone Gap is out, St. Martin's Press, Ohio University Press has published Fall or Fly, the strangely hopeful story of foster care and adoption in Appalachia. What are you working on next? What's in the pipeline, and what might we expect from you coming up soon?
For the past 3 months, I have been the writer in residence in Fayetteville at Lafayette Flats, which is a wonderful, wonderful program run by Sean Means and Amy McLaughlin, who own the flats. And every year they invite someone to come and stay for 3 months and do nothing but write. And I wrote the sequel to Little Bookstore, and I experimented with some fiction, and I also did some op-ed pieces related to Fall or Fly, and all of those have been put out. The sequel and the fiction are in the lap of the publishing gods in New York City through my agent, and the other pieces have gone out to Daily Yonder, and Belt Publishing has one for they have an upcoming anthology about Trump country. I think it's called Red States, Blue Cities. And those things have all gone out. And I cannot thank Sean and Amy enough for the Lafayette Flats residency. And I would also encourage, I know this goes out to a lot of West Virginia writers and people in other states, that is an awesome program. And even though there's only one of them, there are other writing residencies out there. Get yourself a room of your own. Get going.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. Dr. Wendy Welch has been our guest here today on Chapters. We've been talking to her today about her 2 books, The Little Bookstore of Big Stone Gap, and her most recent book, Fall or Fly, the strangely hopeful story of foster care and adoption in Appalachia. And as she mentioned, and as we mentioned, she was chosen and just finished up her 2018 New River Gorge Writer in Residency in Fayetteville, West Virginia. And Wendy, it was a pleasure having you on the program today. Thanks for coming on to talk to us about your books. And as you keep publishing and keep doing new things, we'll have you back on to talk about it. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
We also want to take a moment to thank Chris Dargish and the staff and management of Empire Books and News for providing our on-site support and assistance today. We encourage you to come down to Empire Books and News to inquire about Wendy Welch's books, and also remind you that many of the other authors, editors, and publishers that have been featured on our program have their works for sale at Empire Books and News, located at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. Stop by and get any of your reading tastes satisfied right here at Empire Books and News, and we appreciate their sponsorship of our program each and every time here on Chapters. And if you'd like to reach out to the program via social media, we've got 3 ways that you can stay in contact with what's going on here at the program. The first is through our email address, which is right here at the bottom of the screen. We do ask that you please include your name and the town or city in which you're writing from so that we can keep track of that correspondence. If you like to watch programming on YouTube, we have a Chapters page through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube, and that address is right here at the bottom of the screen. All you need to do is put that into your search browser on your computer and look for the Chapters tab, and we've got all of our author, editor, and publisher interviews archived for you there as well. And Chapters is also on Facebook. Our Chapters Facebook page link is also right here at the bottom of the screen, and we have more of our recent author, editor, and publisher interviews archived there for you, so you can interact with viewers of the program, share content that is featured on the Facebook page, and do all the things that you like to do on Facebook with those Chapters episodes. If you like Facebook, if you like YouTube, or you like traditional email, we've got all kinds of ways for you to stay in contact with the program. We know many of you have been engaged with what we're doing here on the show through one of those social media platforms, and we appreciate that so much. And that will do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time, and in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.